All right. So we are going to do a natal chart and 3 years worth of transits for Dan. I do know Dan, so this reading might be a little bit biased, but I will try my best. It's his birthday in a few days. So instead of starting with today, as far as the transits are concerned, I'm going to fast forward a few days to his 44th birthday and then extend the 3 years of transits from there. So a natal chart is where all the planets were at the moment of your birth. And in Western tropical astrology, we believe that where the planets were at the moment of your birth leaves its mark on your personality and also on the kind of life that you're destined to have. And then your transits are where the planets are at any given time relative to where they were the moment you were born, your natal chart. So, so transits, by interpreting transits, we can figure out whatever is going on in the world at that particular moment, how is it affecting that person? So I will get started. And thank goodness this isn't a synastry reading because that would be extra biased. Synastry, by the way, is when you compare one person's natal chart to the other person's natal chart to understand what impact the two people have on each other. But this is not a synastry reading. And maybe we'll do a synastry reading in the future, but we'll just do natal chart and transits for now. I emailed you images of all the charts that I'm using that were generated off of AstroDientist if you wanted to look at them while we went along here. So I guess I'll get started. So this is quite an intense chart, first of all. I remember how I felt the first time I saw it. So as an astrologer, and I've been studying astrology for over 20 years, I haven't been practicing it professionally. I'm just starting professional practice now, but I've been studying it for over 20 years. And the natal charts that I dislike the most are the ones that are scattered. The ones that are scattered, the ones that have planets in most of the signs, the ones that there are no clear pattern going on. Your chart is not one of those charts, thankfully. Your chart has a very clear and distinctive pattern. And in your case, the clear and distinctive pattern is a very strong fixed sign emphasis, a lack of planets in Earth, although you do have your south node in an Earth sign. Yeah, you don't have any axis cusps in Earth signs either. So, like, you basically got a total lack of Earth except for your south node, which doesn't really count. And I will define astrological terms because you're not someone who is into astrology that much. So it would probably be helpful to define some of the terms. Although with your interest in anthropology, you can at least appreciate the historical significance of a lot of these ideas. So, because they've lasted for centuries, they've been passed down for centuries and centuries. You know, Western astrology might be older than Christianity. So,
It
yeah.
is.
Cool. So we'll get to it here. So first of all charts contain two axes. So one of them is your AC DC line, your ascendant descendant, and that is the horizontal line in your chart, and that has to do with how you react to the world, like your initial reactions to the world, and the initial way that you present yourself to people in your everyday life and when you're at the supermarket and all that stuff. And then the descendant, which is opposite, has to do with one-on-one relationships. So like the ascendant is the beginning of the first house of the self, and then the descendant is the beginning of the seventh house of other people, but other people in a one-on-one sort of context. So the seventh house or the descendant where it starts, the where it's the strongest, could be best friends, business partners, lovers, spouses, and open enemies. So basically people you have one-on-one relationships with, whether they're positive or negative. And then we got your at medium coli, inum coli axis, which is the vertical axis in your chart. And that has to do with the public versus your private self. So the MC, which is the one that's up, the medium coli, has to do with how you interact with the public, your career. It's the cusp of the 10th house of career and whatnot. And then the ice, your inum coli, is has to do with your private self, your family, your home life. So the opposite of like public and career and whatnot. And so, yeah. So we can also look at those axes and we can look at the houses. And even though you might not know which each of those houses represents, we can have some idea of what's important to you in your life based on the planetary emphasis in different areas of your chart. So, for instance, the upper half of your chart, I told you the MC or the medium coli has to do with how you interface with the public. The entire upper half of your chart is more or less the more public facing half of your chart. So people have a lot of planets in the upper half are people who really need to go out there in the world. They don't like staying at home too much. And yeah, and then people with a lot of planets in the southern part of their chart or the lower part of their chart are more likely to be private and they like being at home and then you got the different halves of the chart that are divided by the MCIC. And so we know that the ascendant, which it's on the left side, the ascendant, but because of the wonky way that natal charts work, the left side of the chart is the eastern half, and then the descendant half is the western half of the chart, even though, so it's like a mirror image, basically. Mm-hmm. So people have a lot of planets in the eastern or the left side of the chart are very self-driven individuals. If there are things that they want to get done in their lives, it's up to them, right? And then if they have a lot of planets instead on the western or right side of the chart, even if they are quite capable of thinking for themselves and whatnot, they can't really get much done out of life without cooperating with other people. So you have more planets in the lower half of your chart, like the private home life part of the chart, than the upper, like public part of the chart. But you do have some very important personal planets that are technically in the upper half of your chart. Like you got Venus and you got your sun and Mercury, although your sun and Mercury are in your 12th house. It's kind of weird. So the 12th house is technically in the upper public half. And I guess you can think of the 12th house as like the collective subconscious. But planets in the 12th house are kind of hidden and mysterious. The 12th house represents hospitals and prisons and solitude. And also, whereas the 7th house represents, the one-on-one relationships house that starts the descendant represents your one-on-one relationships, positives and negatives, lovers, open enemies, business partners. 12th house is hidden enemies as well, that sort of thing. So one thing that your chart has in common with mine, there are a few different ways that there's a few different things that your chart has in common with mine, but one of them is that the ruler of your chart is in the 12th house. So what do we mean by that? So when we talk about a chart ruler, what we mean is the planet. So everyone has a sign of the zodiac on their ascendant. So in your case, your ascendant is in Leo. And then the planet associated with that sign is the ruler of your natal chart. So that would be the sun. So you've got your sun in Leo in your 12th house. So your chart ruler is in your 12th house. And I got my chart rulers of I have Mars and Pluto in my 12th house. So those are people who like solitude, basically.
Yeah.
And as I've said before, like you, on one hand, your sun is very, very strong because it's in its own sign of Leo. So when a planet is in its own sign, we call that domicile. It's acting very naturally. It's not being modified by other planetary influences through zodiac sign. It's just its purest form. So you got like your sun in its purest form in Leo, right? But then
Mhm.
you got it in your 12th house, which is kind of like hidden and mysterious and secretive. And I kind of think of your sun as like, have you ever looked at the sky on a cloudy, stormy day? On a stormy day, and you can kind of, and like either the sun is rising or the sun is setting, and you can see the sun kind of just a tiny bit peeking through like dark, stormy clouds. That's how I think
Mhm.
of the sun. So yeah, so you got the sun in its own sign, but it's in the 12th house. Like the sun and Leo and all that are normally very extroverted, but in the 12th house are very hidden and secretive. So that's got to be quite a clusterfuck. And also, it's really emphasized because it's a planet in its own sign. It's a very, very personal planet. Some people would argue that the sun is the most personal of the planets, although uh, older astrologers from other times consider the moon to be a more personal planet. But either way, it's almost as personal as it gets, or it is as personal as it gets. It's its own sign, but and it's ruling your chart, but it's in the 12th house. So that's going to be a really interesting interpretation there. And
Mm.
also, like Leo is like fixed fire, right? So it you can't really push it to it'll stick with something if it's really into it and it's got the staying power, and it can be stubborn. And I know all about like stubborn fixed signs because I've got a very heavy fixed emphasis myself, and I don't like people pushing me into things when I'm not ready and whatnot. And I can, when I'm really into something, I can focus on it for years if I need to. I can, people with a lot of fixed influences in their natal charts can often win battles just by being more patient than everyone else. Just saying it out and then waiting until everyone makes mistakes. And because you were the tortoise and they were the hares, you win, right? So that's one kind of positive thing about having a lot of a fixed emphasis. uh, the negative side of having a fixed emphasis is if what you're fixed on or what you're fixed in is kind of bad, you're going to be stuck in it for a while. All right. So there we go. So the other bit of the fixed emphasis of your chart comes from your moon in Scorpio, and you got Jupiter in a very tight conjunction with your moon in Scorpio. And Scorpio is like fixed water, whereas Leo is fixed fire. So it's a lot of fixity there. So if you've gone through life feeling like you stick with things a lot longer than most people, and that's obviously the fixity in your chart, and also kind of makes you stubborn and whatnot. So I relate to that energy very well. What I don't relate to so much is your total lack of earth. You got a total lack of earth in your chart. You don't have any planets in earth signs. So I guess I might as well just quickly go through what the different elements represent. So fire, and you've got a fair bit of fire in your chart because of the Leo stuff, and you got outer planets in Sagittarius. So and then you got your MC, your medium coli in Aries. So fire is like an initiating, gets things started. If it's inspired, then if there's something fueling it, just like fire in real life, it will be inspired. If it's not being fueled by something, it will burn out and be completely out of energy. Right? But if you need like inspiration, motivation, having a lot of fire can definitely help. And then there's the element of air, and air is the element that I lack. So air is thinking and relating to other people and considering information for information's sake rather than if it has any sort of practical implication, which is what kind of bothers me as someone lacking in air when someone has a lot of air, is that, oh, you're just coming up with all these completely ridiculous ideas, but I don't see any purpose of all this, right? But someone who has a lot of air, it would be like, oh, we got all these ideas and they're just they're ridiculous, but and they also yeah, I'm not really at home with air because as I said, I don't have any planets in air. But yeah, it has to do with relating with people, kind of objective communication too and whatnot, maybe being a bit scatterbrained, at least from my perspective. And then another element is water. So water is emotions. Uh, Someone who lacks water in their chart, they have feel just they have feelings, but they might not understand their feelings, right? So I've heard of really well-known astrologers interpret a lack of water in someone's chart as when they get when they're really sad about something, they don't know why they're sad and they might not even recognize that they're sad. They could be crying, but because they have a lack of water, they have difficulty understanding that, right? So you still have a heart and feelings. You just you don't have a way to process it very well. But that's not your situation here because you've got quite a lot of water in your chart. So all the water in your chart makes you very sensitive and emotional. So the element that you lack is earth. So earth is grounded and practical and quite frankly boring. And I'll be the first to admit that. The earth is a boring element. And I've got my sun in Capricorn and my moon in Taurus, which are two earth signs that are like the two biggest planets in my chart as far as being personal are concerned. If it wasn't for all the fiery, watery shit in my chart, I would be a very boring person. But I'm an interesting person because I've got all that fire and water that all that earthy core is surrounded by. But you lacking earth, it doesn't. When someone lacks an element, it can mean that they go back and forth between obsessing with matters related to that element because they're like overcompensating or completely forgetting about matters related to that element. So you got a lack of earth, which means that it might be difficult for you to be in touch with your own body, right? If if you're hungry or uncomfortable or it's a little cool or whatnot, or you need to rest there is a big problem for people who have a lot of fire but not a lot of earth is they might be trying to do too much and they're not listening to the signals that their body is giving them to rest, right?
True.
So, but it can also make you obsessed with practical matters. You can go back and forth between obsession with, so earth could also be like money, and you could be, so you go back and forth between obsession with that element and being oblivious to matters of that element. So in my case, it would surprise people that if someone's just starting to learn astrology, it might surprise someone that I completely lack air. But knowing a little bit about me, and if you understood astrology a bit more, it would make sense that I lack air, right? Because on one hand, sometimes I overcompensate for my lack of air by, just trying to lose myself in like intellectualism and ideas and whatnot. And then sometimes I'm completely oblivious to air matters, right? Like I, uh, I definitely, I don't enjoy thinking about ideas if I can't see a purpose for the ideas. If I can see a purpose for the ideas, then I'm interested. But like I've known people with a lot of air in their charts, and sometimes they just really get on my nerves because they're like, "What if this? What if that? What if blah 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 blah?" It's like, why are you asking me to ponder what I would do if there were 30 pink elephants in my apartment when that's not something I ever have to consider as a possibility? But like an air heavy person would you go, I just got ideas, I'm just throwing it out there. Someone with a lot of air could also be like, especially someone with a lot of like Libra can be like, let's go to Kensington Market and say hello to every single acquaintance I know here. And but so yeah, I'm definitely a good example of someone who sometimes overcompensates for their lack of air. Because not having air doesn't mean you're not intelligent and you don't have thoughts. It just means that you don't process them in an air sort of way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you do have air. You do have air. In your case, you've got Saturn, Pluto, and Mars in Libra. And yeah, that's it for air, but you still got those three planets in air. So one thing that's kind of interesting about your chart is just when you were born, just a little bit after you were born, Mars and Pluto went from Libra to Scorpio. So when a planet goes from one sign to another, we call that an ingress. So Mars and Pluto are right toward the end of Libra in your chart. Pluto especially is a very, very slow moving planet, right? And then shortly after you were born, that started a whole generation of Pluto and Scorpio, of which I'm one of those people born during that time, right? The way, and then there's like a whole generation that had that signature, and you were born just before those planets entered the sign. Just after I was born, Neptune and Jupiter left Sagittarius and entered Capricorn. I still got Neptune and Jupiter at the end of Sagittarius. So yeah, that's kind of an interest. I don't know how to explain that, but I find that kind of interesting detail to notice. So you got very, very strong fixity in your chart. You're definitely not someone who can be pushed easily. So I'm always quite cognizant of that. And then there's also a lack of earth. So the boring practical things don't necessarily come naturally to you.
That's
And
true.
right. So I see, first of all, there's a lot of squares in your chart because again, you got you got some out of sign squares, first of all. So you got like your Sun and Mercury near the beginning of Leo, and it's doing an out of sign square to let's see here. To the moon. Well, no, it's an in sign square to the moon, but you got an out of sign square to Mars. I've got Sun square Mars as well. But when we say that something is an out of sign aspect, we mean that normally that aspect wouldn't be between planets in those two signs. Right? So, okay, I should probably explain the aspects. So a conjunction is when two planets are like right near each other. Of course, in the sky, they are possibly light years apart. But as far as drawing a ruler from the Earth to where we see those planets in the sky, they're on top of each other. That makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a conjunction. So when two planets are conjunct, that means that the energies of those two planets are fused together. So then oppositions are when two planets are roughly 180 degrees apart. So it can be a kind of tense aspect, but also if they can negotiate with each other, it can actually be a complementary sort of relationship. So then there's squares. So squares cause friction, but they are considered to be a negative aspect. But the positive side of squares is it does give someone a kind of oomph. So astrologers actually don't like to see all positive aspects, because someone who has all positive aspects is someone who's going to take life too easy and assume because things most of the time come easily for that person, they might overshoot that and not be prepared to face difficulty or challenge and be completely unprepared when bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Things are so easy for them most of the time, right? So it's good to have some negative, challenging aspects, and it's good to have some positive, like free flowing aspects. So trine is another positive, free flowing aspect. Normally, when two planets are trine, they're both in the same element. Uh, Normally, when two planets are square, they're in signs that are the same triplicity. So when we say triplicity, we mean cardinal, fixed, and mutable. So cardinal is like initiating, fixed is keep on going, stuck there, and then mutable is adaptable and tying up loose ends and finishing things. So yeah. So yeah, you've got a very, very interesting chart. Very interesting. So you got sun square moon. So the sun is like your conscious self. It's not necessarily what comes the most naturally to you. That would be your moon, but it's the part of the core of yourself that you aspire to. Right. So you got your sun Leo there, and then the moon is what comes literally the most naturally to you that you don't have to think about, and it's like your emotional core and whatnot. So sun square moon, which means that your ego can sometimes have a little bit of friction with your emotional self, but it can give both planets kind of like an oomph that can give you a lot of motivation as well. So and then Mars it so Mars at the end of Libra squaring your Leo sun, so that's an out of sign square. So I've got Sun square Mars in my own chart too. And so Mars is like the planet of like action, not just fighting. It's not like when people first start learning about astrology, they purely think about Mars as like attacking people and whatnot. It's not just like violence and attacking people and all that. It's also getting things started. How do you proceed with things? How do you what gets you out of bed? You know, that sort of thing is Mars as well. It's not all violence. But I've we both have Sun square Mars. So you got your ego kind of like in a friction kind of relationship with like your oomph action kind of planet, right? So we can assert our ego needs fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe with a little too much effort sometimes. But the kind of positive side of that is yeah, it's less like you're less likely to be a doormat, definitely. That sounds square Mars. You've got Venus, I would call that a conjunction. So you got Venus conjunct your north node in Cancer. So there are nodes for all of the planets. Those are like basically they're not planetary bodies. Those are mathematical calculations based on those planets. But the only nodes that Western astrologers really consider the vast majority of the time are the nodes of the moon. So we consider the North Node to be the direction that you need to be going in order to be personally fulfilled. And then the South Node are things that you are already familiar with, gifts that you bring into your lifetime and whatnot. But if you try to be too much like that, you're going backwards. Now, evolutionary astrologers, evolutionary astrologers believe that people have multiple lives. So if one is an evolutionary astrologer, they believe that the North Node is where you got to go for good karma in your next life, whereas your South Node is your karma from previous lives.
mm,
People who are not evolutionary astrologers might not believe that we have multiple lives, but still believe that you'll be more fulfilled if you go in the direction of your North Node. And then the South Node are like things that are more natural to you, but if you, yeah, I already said all that. I'm very repetitive. So you've got your North Node in Cancer, which means that your South Node is in Capricorn because the nodes are always opposite each other. So having your North Node in Cancer means that you need to learn to be more uh, well, I can maybe start with your South Node in Capricorn. Maybe it'll make more sense when we get to the North Node in Cancer. So South Node in Capricorn could indicate that in previous lives you were someone who took on a lot of responsibility. These are things we associate with Capricorn, right? Someone who took on a lot of responsibility may have been someone who was like Jack is a little boy, all work and no play sort of thing. Uh, so with Cancer, as your North Node, you got to learn to listen to your heart a little bit more in life and not get too don't get too consumed by your responsibilities in life and whatnot, and just learn to embrace your heart a little bit more, right?
mm,
The nodes of the moon transit a sign for a little over a year. So uh, when you were in grade school, for instance, most of the kids in your grade also had their North Node in Cancer. So
mm,
yeah. So and then you got Venus there. Having Venus there helps. So Venus in Cancer, if you had kids, then it means that you could be very, because Cancer is like family and home life and whatnot. If you have kids, then it could mean that you are very you're very kind and loving toward kids, but if not, then it's more your Venus expresses itself in nurturing ways. So your Venus is like your the part of your psyche that likes things and likes attracting things to yourself and whatnot. Uh, when you compliment someone and when you receive compliments, that's a very Venetian sort of exchange, right? And even the
mhm,
manliest men have Venus in their charts, and it's important. So, yeah. So Venus in Cancer, it's a very sort of it's a very sort of like nurturing sort of way for Venus to express itself. Is the best way I can communicate that.
mm,
So, Moon and Jupiter conjunct in the early degrees of Scorpio. And yeah, those are your planets that are on my Mars and Pluto as far as synastry are concerned. So Jupiter in Scorpio, and when I saw your Jupiter in Scorpio, it made a lot of sense to me because one interpretation of Jupiter in Scorpio is someone who likes to do research and detective work and investigations and whatnot. You do that in your career, right? Well, you're supposed to anyway, right? So
Yes.
yeah, you digging things out of the ground and analyzing them like a detective is very much an expression of your Jupiter and Scorpio. And then being on your moon, which is also very interesting because the moon is in detriment in Scorpio, but then it's got Jupiter there, which gives a lot of like oomph and energy and enthusiasm. I, you might I'm pretty sure, like having like both your moon and Jupiter conjunct in Scorpio like that, sometimes the only thing that can calm you down or make you feel emotionally fulfilled or satisfied is to get to the bottom of things, like investigative, like maybe doing metaphorical detective work into a situation is what you need to do sometimes in order to truly feel comfortable.
Mm. That's very
You
true.
and you've got that near your IC, which is Uranum coli, which is like the home and family life and whatnot. So those are your private gifts, I guess. Maybe gifts that you inherited from your family as well. Yeah, you've got like very, very like a lot of emphasis on that bottom part of the chart. So Mars, Pluto, and Saturn all there. Pluto and Saturn being there is generational, right? So because of Pluto's irregular orbit, yeah. So in astronomical terms, Pluto is no longer a planet, but in astrological terms, it is. Same as the moon and the sun are planets in astrology, even though obviously they're not in astronomy. Right. So but the one thing that's kind of weird about Pluto is its orbit is irregular. So that's also why astronomers decided that it's not a planet anymore. But what its significance to astrology is it spends more time in some signs than in other signs. The closer it gets to its own sign of Scorpio, the least amount of time it spends there. So Pluto spent only about 13 and a half years in Scorpio, which for such a slow moving planet is a short amount of time it spends in the sign. And it spends the most amount of time opposite to Scorpio, like in Taurus, where I think it spends over 30 years. Libra is right adjacent to Scorpio. So when you were born, Pluto had been transiting Libra for a good 14, 15 years or so before you were born. And you were born just around the time, well, Pluto is at 24 degrees Libra in your chart. But I know, and I know because I know about my natal chart, and I'm like a year and a half your junior. Very soon after you were born, Pluto ingressed into Scorpio, which was monumental because it's like slow moving planet and also in its own sign, right? But you got all this intense scorpionic energy, but it's still at the end degrees of Libra, which is more about like negotiation and being a good diplomat and whatnot. So there's a lot of like internal contradictions with that too. So just as your sun is kind of conflicted because it's in such an extroverted sign, but it's in such an introverted house, right? I see a similar conflict with a scorpionic emphasis in your chart with your moon and Jupiter there, but the planets associated with Scorpio, Mars being the traditional ruler and Pluto being the modern ruler, are at the end degrees of Libra, which are very like peacekeeper and all of that. So like whereas Scorpio is like, it's like when I do it, like I woke up this morning, I chose violence. I went out there and there was some asshole on social media and I put them in their place sort of thing, right? Whereas Libra would be like, I'm gonna be diplomatic here, and well, I got to consider both sides of this situation, and blah blah
Mm.
blah. So I can also in my interactions with you sometimes I've seen like a kind of tension between your moon being in Scorpio and like your Mars being in Libra. So Mars in Libra is like my initiative energy is in diplomacy. Now,
Hmm.
initiative works a lot better when you're just thinking about yourself and not having to negotiate with other people. So that's why Mars is not the happiest in Libra. It's in its fall. But the upside of Mars in Libra is it can often make for good diplomats as well, right? So, and Saturn is very happy. Saturn is exalted in Libra. So when we say a planet is exalted, it's not in its own sign, but it's in a sign that complements that planet really well. So you've got Libra is not Saturn's own sign because Saturn's own sign is Capricorn and also traditionally Aquarius. But Saturn being in Libra, it's exalted because Libra is giving energy to Saturn that is very complementary to it. In that case, it's Saturn is like limits and restrictions, and the god Saturn being like the stern taskmaster and whatnot. In Libra, the sign of diplomacy and fairness, and the symbol of justice being a lady with a blindfold holding scales. That is the ultimate Libra symbol, right? And that's why the symbol of Libra is the scales, right? So Saturn being there, so your limits and rule making and structure and whatnot, if it's diplomatic, that is a very complementary energy for that planet, right? Whereas I've got an exalted planet with my moon in Taurus. So the moon isn't associated in Taurus, but when the moon, your emotions is like in the earthy, sort of grounded sign of Taurus, it grounds your emotions, right? So, so what you find comforting about me is probably my moon in Taurus. That is a kind of grounding sort of energy. And I'm certain that I would be way more emotionally fucked. If people think I'm emotionally fucked up, they have no idea. I am, I would be way more emotionally fucked up if I didn't have that nice exalted moon in Taurus kind of giving me a sort of grounding. So you got Saturn in Libra, which is exalted. So if you really want to, when you can get out of the storm that is your psyche a little bit, you can actually be a really good diplomat, which is probably a useful sort of energy for you to break out into when the stormy intensity gets a little too much. And it's in your third house, which has to do with communications and local travel and siblings. So you are actually a very effective communicator, but you became an effective communicator through challenge and through adversity because you've got all the planets that have to do with challenge and adversity, Saturn, Pluto, and Mars in your third house. So communications did not come naturally to you, but because of the challenges that were thrown at you in matters regarding to that house, you actually became good at it because those challenges spurred you on to perfect your approach toward those sort of things. So that's sort of how malefics can sometimes be quite beneficial. So the outer planets are less personal. So when you're interpreting a natal chart, the more personal planets, the sun, Mercury, moon, whatnot, are more significant, and then the farther away, the outer planets like Neptune, Uranus, and whatnot are considered to be less significant unless they make really strong aspects with your personal planets. Right? When we interpret transits, it's the opposite. When we interpret transits, we pay more attention to the outer planets than the inner planets. The reason being, the moon goes does a complete rotation through the zodiac every 28 and a half days. That's our month, right? The moon does a complete rotation around the zodiac in 28 and a half days. The sun makes a complete rotation around the zodiac in a little more than 365 days. There's our year, right? Mercury, I think, takes about as long as the sun or a little bit longer than the sun to go through the entire zodiac. Venus, I think, goes through the entire zodiac every 18 months or so. So those planets go around the zodiac too much for where it happens to be at the time when we interpret transits being super duper significant. It can be a little bit significant. Sometimes we interpret those things, but the most important transits to interpret are the outer planets, which are slower moving, right? So Jupiter takes roughly 12 years to go through the entire zodiac. Saturn takes roughly 28.5 years. Pluto takes over 240 years to do an entire circle around the zodiac. So no one lives to see their Pluto return. So when we say a planet returns, that means it's returning to where it was when we were born. So to the best of my knowledge, the oldest people on record are just a little bit over 120 years old. I think the oldest person on record was like 121 years old or something like that. And then I would say roughly 75% of the population dies before they reach their 90th birthday. So, and it would be really medically freakish based on what we currently know for someone to live to see 240 years. Unless they had a time machine, that would be scientifically freakish in another area of science, right? So no one has lived for their Pluto return, and I'm pretty sure no one has lived to see their Pluto half return, but that might not be true. I'd have to look at the charts of the couple of people in history on record who have made it to 120. So, yeah. But a lot of people do see their Pluto quarter return, which takes them into their 60s to their 70s, right? So, yeah. So, yeah, you've got a very, very interesting chart, very strong natural leadership tendencies, like with your sun in Leo and your Aries MC and whatnot. Very fixed, very much a homebody and very private with like the Scorpio shit, and then your ruling planet being the 12th house and lots of bottom like or emphasis in your chart. You've got more planet. Yeah, you've got just about more of a planetary emphasis on the eastern left side of your chart than the west left side of the chart. So most of the time to get things done in your life, you do need to take care of that yourself.
Yes.
Uh, my chart really frustrates me because I've got all of my planets on the eastern or left side of my chart, except for my moon, which is directly on my descendant. So when people do things for me that I want to have done, and I don't have to tell them that I want that, nothing in this world makes me happier than not having to tell someone to do something for me and they do it for me, because that's such a rare occurrence to me. Because the vast majority of the time, if I want something, I got to do it for myself. And I find that very frustrating because my heart, my soul, my moon wants other people to do it. But I
Mhm.
learned to always make it loud and clear what I want and need at all times. Because if I don't, and if I don't go after things myself most of the time, then I don't get things that I want. Right? Someone who has a lot of others emphasis in their chart. Uh, if good things happen to them, it will happen to them with the cooperation of other people. So there, that's your natal chart. and your birthday is really, really soon, and that's a solar return. So everyone, everyone's birthday is a solar return, and your solar return is very, very soon. It's in let's say 22nd, so it's in 5 days. So
Hmm.
that's your natal chart, Dan. So go on to an interpretation of transits for your birthday in a few days. So yeah, so July 27th, 2026. So definitely transiting sign is conjunct your natal sun because that's what a birthday is. This
Hmm.
year, you also got Jupiter there, which that means however shitty your past year may have been, this coming year is going to bring a lot of opportunities for you. It is like in the eastern or left half of your chart. So the opportunities that present themselves to you are still things that you have to take initiative and carry out. But you should be on the lookout for those opportunities to improve the direction that your life is going. But
Hmm.
this coming year, especially now and the next few months, these opportunities will present themselves to you. And you will be able to see them better very soon because tomorrow, Mercury is going to stop retrograding and it's going to go direct. So from tomorrow and then to your birthday, and I would say maybe up until like a month after your birthday, that's a time period that I would especially look out for opportunities for you to steer your life in the direction that you really need it to go. And I can't tell you what to do, and other people can't tell you what to do. You've got to look out for those opportunities and make those decisions for yourself. But I would recommend looking out for them.
Hmm.
So this could be a very auspicious year for you. So that's very positive. So some other outer planets for me to look at as transits. So Pluto has been transiting your sixth house for quite some time. And it's still in your sixth house, and it's going to be in your sixth house for another several years because it's such a slow moving planet. But Pluto, the planet of transformation, going through your sixth house, the sixth house is like your everyday mundane work. So if you think of like the 10th house is career, sixth house is more your job, right? Uh, Sixth house is like doing chores around the house and doing the boring shit that needs to get done and whatnot. Your everyday sort of habits have been transformed in some way or another for the past roughly over a decade now. And it's going to keep on going on. But I would say, in another 7, 8 years, decade from now, Pluto will cross over to your descendant line. So now that transformative energy is going to subjugate itself into your relations with other people one on one. So I hope that affects your one-on-one relationships in a more positive, transformative way. But we will see.
Hmm.
I'm letting my personal biases slip in as an astrologer. I shouldn't be doing that. It's very unprofessional. So transiting Mercury. Now, normally I don't spend so much time looking at personal planets when I do a transit interpretation, but Mercury has been retrograde for the past few weeks since June 29th, and then it's going to go stationary direct tomorrow. Thank God, because I hate Mercury retrograde so much. I hate them. They totally fuck up my life. I hate them so much. But that is a Mercury that just recently went direct as of your 44th birthday, is it's around your Cancer North Node. So this is very much a time where you're also kind of thinking about the direction that you need to be heading in your life, which really complements the other stuff with like, the Sun Jupiter conjunction on your sun on your birthday. So yeah, this is perhaps more than at any other point in your life ever. this next month or so is a turning point in your life, and you're gonna have to look for opportunities to steer your life in the direction that you need to go. But this will be the time to do it, probably even more so than at any point in your life. I mean, definitely throughout your lifespan, there'll be more opportunities for you to steer your life in a positive direction. But this is the most pivotal part of your life, basically, what you're entering in right now. So there you go. No pressure, Dan. No pressure. So we're going to fast forward to October 27th. I'm not going to do every 3 months. By the time we get to a year from now, I'm going to fast forward by the year.
Okay.
So October 27th, 2026. Let's see. Anything? Yes, I see something interesting. Chiron transiting Chiron has just about touched your medium coli, so like the cusp of your like career and your public life, basically. So around October 27th, you might find that so Chiron is like the wounded healer. So your innermost wounds, other people's innermost wounds, uh, this is not going to, one interpretation of that, like Chiron transiting your MC, could be other people come to you with like their deepest, darkest secrets and wounds, and they want you to heal them. But other people, not on a one-on-one sense, that would be more your descendant, it would be more like the public. Are the public going to come to you around October 27th with their innermost wounds and expect you to heal them? Maybe. Or another interpretation could be that your innermost wounds will project themselves out into the public around October 27th. So that could be fairly interesting. There you go. What else do I notice that's kind of interesting? Mars just kind of crosses your ascendant with Jupiter around the 27th of October. So that'll be a great time for you to assert yourself, basically, having Mars and Jupiter crossing over your ascendant. So the things that you need out of life around October 27th would be a good time for you to assert those things. Right? And then you got Venus is in your fourth house. So I interpret that more as if you need to get things sorted with your home and family life, with diplomacy, with tact and whatnot, it would be a good time for you to do that. And yeah. So there we go. We will fast forward now to January 27, 2027. So let's see, anything interesting that isn't something that I've previously interpreted? Not really. These are things that I could have mentioned previously because these are slow-moving planets that have been affecting you for a while. But Saturn has been transiting your ninth house for a little bit. So the ninth house has to do with, so whereas the third house is like local travel and communications and whatnot, the ninth house is more long distance travel and foreign cultures and exploring things. And you can think of the third house as like elementary school, and like the ninth house is like university. But it can also be going out there in the world and exploring things and whatnot. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, so long distance travel has been a limiting kind of influence for you for a while. And also with Neptune there has been a kind of a bewildering, confusing sort of so long distance travel might not be to Australia. It might, it depends on like how you interpret it, right? It could be just going from one part of the province to another if it's a long distance, right? So maybe if your travel plans have been limiting and bewildering, maybe it's because Neptune and Saturn have been transiting your ninth house for a while. So,
mm,
and if people from foreign cultures and foreign places have had that same effect on you, that could be those outer planets affecting you in that way as well. So we
mm.
will fast forward now to your 45th birthday, so July 27th, 2028. No, that's 2027, sorry. Damn you, Mercury retrograde, making me sound like a fool. So Uranus just entered your 11th house. So the 11th house has to do with, so all the houses that are associated with air signs have to do with people, right? So the third house can be thought of as siblings or sibling-like figures in your life. The seventh house is like one-on-one relationships, lovers, business partners, open enemies. The 11th house is more social groups, political activism, the people that you were just acquaintances with at the bar that you like hanging out with. You don't do that. But if you were someone who hung out at the bar with people you had very casual friendships with, that would definitely be an 11th house matter. Right. So Uranus has just about entered your 11th house a year from now. So Uranus is at home in the 11th house because 11th Uranus is associated with Aquarius and Aquarius is associated with the 11th house. So Uranus is a planet of like sudden change and rebelliousness and whatnot. And so it would be a good idea a year from now, so like for your 45th birthday, to think about how you can make a positive difference with social groups, how you can find your identity and change things up from a sociological perspective. That can be interpreted so many different ways. There you go. And then the transiting North Node is not quite crossed your descendant yet, but it will a few months after your 45th birthday. So there's going to be a lot of like fate and destiny going on there when it comes to your one-on-one relationships in general. So now we're going to fast forward to July 27th, 2028. So let's see here. Uranus has been in your 11th house for a little bit. We've already interpreted that. Saturn is now well crossed into your 10th house at that point. So now you're going to find the limitations and challenges, and we got Chiron there too, having to do with like your public self and your career and whatnot. So 2 years from now, there's going to be maybe challenges and limitations when it comes to your career and your public life. But if you use that energy in a positive, constructive way and be a builder, you could be building a new career or building changes into your career or your public life that could be very positive for you. But it's going to present themselves into your life in a challenging, negative way, at least initially. So just a little bit of warning about that. But also at that point, Jupiter had been transiting your second house for a while. So second house is like your values and money and whatnot. So after having roughly a good year when it comes to your personal possessions and finances and whatnot, you've been facing some challenges in your career. That's kind of an interesting combination of energies. So now finally, we're going to get to July 27th, 2029. Where is it here? Did I even download that chart? Tell me I downloaded that chart. Okay, I'm going to Oh, yeah, I didn't download that chart. Now I'm going to download it now. Okay, so now we're going to open it because I just downloaded it. There we go. So July 27th, 2029. Is there anything interesting that I haven't interpreted previously? Let's see here. Okay, so Well, yeah, we're a little bit closer to, let's see. Okay, so I mean, the only thing I can really say is that around July 27th, 2029, Jupiter had been transiting your third house for a while. So there could be good luck with like local travel and communications and whatnot. There are lots of other things going on too, but they're all interpretations I've already given you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's about it. So do you have any questions?
No, not really. It was very thoughtful. Uh, I have a little bit of a better idea of what's on the horizon.
Yeah, yeah. So take advantage of these opportunities that'll be coming to you really soon. So I'm gonna stop recording and maybe we can switch to Signal after this.
Okay.
So I gotta stop the recording.